Hello, everybody. I am Drew Duncan, and this is the Sync 57 Sports Show. There's going to be plenty of conversation, obviously, about the NBA opening night last night. We'll take a look at those two games. And then, of course, in addition, we're going to be discussing a little bit of college football, a preview of some of the games that are coming up this weekend, and what should be a dynamic, or is at least anticipated to be a dynamic weekend in college football. All right, let's get to it. Obviously, last night, opening games, Lakers and Warriors. The Warriors, I think, did what a lot of people expected them to do. I personally anticipated that game was going to be a little closer. And one of the things that I talked about was looking at that game and then asking yourself, okay, when you watch this game, does Golden State look like they're potentially repeat champions? And does LA look like they are ready to compete at a high level and go deep into the playoffs? I think unequivocally the answer is no. You know, the Warriors just are still the Warriors. They play the team game. They rotate. They get to their spots. They know their assignments. The shooting is incredible. Steph showed up huge. Golden State goes on a 23-4 run in the third quarter. Now, granted, LeBron and company did make a bit of a run into the fourth, but by then it was pretty much too late. Steph came back in, took over the basketball game. Clay, they just did what they needed to do to win that game, and honestly, they pretty much dominated from, I would say, late second quarter all the way into about the middle of the fourth quarter. It was their game. And I've talked about this before over the years with the Warriors, where I've called them the third quarter Warriors. There is something about the third quarter where Golden State just takes over the game. I don't know if it's adjustments, whatever the case may be. It's just like they're outworking you, out hustling you, and it's theirs. We've seen it in the playoffs time and time again. They'll be down or tied, and third quarter, big runs. And basketball 101, it's a game of runs. And when all is said and done, it was the Warriors who went on the run that essentially ended the game. I know it was only third quarter, but they dominated. They played very good defense into that third quarter. And they won decidedly. And by the way, no issues between Poole and Draymond. I told you these guys are professionals. You know, the problem with the Lakers is they just don't seem to clack as a full unit. Westbrook and LeBron, they shared some continuity. Bron hit him a few times in transition, although Russ wasn't able to finish most of the time. But they're just not playing the team game. There's a lot of individuals on the Lakers. And for all the nonsense going on with Golden State between Poole and Draymond, which I told you was going to be no big deal when all was said and done, that these are two grown men, I just don't know what everybody expected. So there's that. If you're asking me, at the moment, yeah, Golden State looks like they're ready to go on another run. And the Lakers look like they won't even make the playoffs again. So there's that. Boston and Philly. You know, pretty good game for the most part, if I'm being honest with you. I really thought, though, that Boston was finding more balance. Tatum playing out of his mind. 39 minutes in that game. Oh, and by the way, it wasn't just the 35 points that he had, but it was the 12 boards. You had Brogdon and Williams off the bench playing really good. And, you know, if Boston looks like they can make another run, you know, probably, I don't know, but it's one game, bro. Honestly, for all four of these teams that I'm talking about, it's just one game. Boston definitely needs to work on their free throws. Only 78% as a team last night. They allowed 24 points off of turnovers. I thought they were better in the fast breaks, though. I thought they were better at finding the balance in their pacing of the game, which means they dictated at an increased level, and they were also very good at slowing it down and going half court. I do think that Marcus Smart, since everybody else is going to be talking about it, why not? I do think that initially Marcus Smart reacted a little too over the top for what happened with Joel Embiid. It was a tie-up, man. And, since he was in college, it's easy to look at Marcus Smart and call him the villain. I actually stood up for him with the college thing that happened and some other situations. But this time, I feel like he overreacted. I think that he was upset because he was feeling a little injured. But, when you watch Joel, it doesn't look like he's trying to, quote, snap his arm off. It appears to me that he's just trying to get the ball, get it out of his hands, and get out of the tie-up. That's about it. And Joel Embiid is a big, strong man. And I don't think it was done on purpose with any malicious intent. So I just think that he overreacted. Now, later on, I will say, there was a foul that was overturned. They still gave him a technical, which I didn't understand because, and the thing was, the reaction to the referees was so mild to me that I'm just sitting here, I'm thinking to myself, like, how's that a tech in the first place? It's one of those things where I'm watching and I'm just like, come on, bro. Like, really, you're calling that a tech? And then in addition to that, if there's no foul, which is what was being argued to begin with, then how does a technical foul just continue to stand? Now, look, I'm not above thinking to myself, okay, look, if a guy really overreacts or gets in an official's face or whatever the case may be, then yeah, okay, keep it, I guess. Despite being right or wrong, if somebody does too much, I get it. But I'm sitting there thinking to myself, like, that didn't warrant a tech to begin with. They overturned it, so it wasn't a foul. Why keep the tech and let Harden shoot 2 free throws? Blows me away. To me, they got to look at that in the NBA. A little too trigger happy, and I understand that things that got chippy before in the game, obviously, with Embiid and Smart. I get that, all right, but situational basketball in every moment. There was nothing going on there. The players weren't getting ruckus in that moment. You can't leave situations from earlier in the game in the back of your mind that allow you to dictate how you officiate the game going forward. And I understand it's an imperfect world and referees are going to be imperfect people. I get that. But with the ability to have replay now, why can't they go back and look at the tech and go, maybe that didn't even warrant it to begin with? Whatever, man. It's just me, I guess, Regardless, opening night last night, tonight, there's going to be a bunch more games on. So we'll see how the season, obviously, look, man, it's a long year in the NBA, okay? There is a lot of basketball to be played. And it's not like this is going to dictate the whole season, at least not in my estimation. By the way, though, do you see the picture that came out of LeBron? The hate was real when he was mugging Steph Curry during the ring ceremony. That was pretty good. Other games tonight, obviously NBA, it's going to be Magic taking on the Pistons. You got the Wizards facing the Pacers, Rockets taking on the Hawks, Pelicans at the Nets, which Stephen A. said the Nets are going all the way this year. You do you, bro. You got the Bulls taking on the Heat, Cavs, Raptors, Knicks versus Grizzlies. I think that's going to be an interesting basketball game, actually. Thunder, Timberwolves, I believe the same. Hornets and Spurs, Nuggets, Jazz, Mavericks, Suns, Blazers, and the Kings. All right. College football. A lot of games. We're not going to discuss them all. But there are a lot of games that people are anticipating being very good. Obviously, I think at the top of that list is going to be Syracuse and Clemson. That game right now looks to potentially decide the ACC. The only other team hot on their trails is going to be North Carolina. So you got Syracuse and Clemson, both undefeated. CFP on the line, especially for Clemson. I think Syracuse eventually trips up. It may even be against Clemson. But right now for Clemson, probably still more on the line than there are for the Orange. All right. UCLA, Oregon, that's going to be on the menu for this weekend. Texas at Oklahoma State. Look, Oklahoma State still has a shot. It's only one loss. KU is out of the picture, right? And TCU has a big game against Kansas State coming up this weekend as well. So if TCU falls, even though right now you lose the head-to-head, that definitely keeps you in it. Okay? So let's take a look at some of the games. Oh, and don't forget Mississippi State's going to be playing Alabama. And Mississippi State, by the way, I've already said, I don't think can compete with Bama. But let's dive into it a little bit here. All right, obviously UCLA, Oregon out of the Pac-12. Right now, Oregon, believe it or not, is the favorite in that game. Look, ever since getting blown out by Georgia to start the season, 49-3, Bo Nix and company have played pretty good football, right? They beat BYU, who was then ranked by more than 20. They beat Washington State only by 3. But to me, their big win so far has been over BYU. Now, here's the kicker. At the time, Washington State believed to be good, ended up not being. Here's the deal. UCLA has more to lose right now than Oregon. I do not think a one-loss Pac-12 champion, unless there is some miracle, gets into the CFP. I've already talked about the possibility of having a 2-loss team at some point in the CFP. I think we could potentially see that this season. We did see it in the BCS era, if I remember correctly, right? Wasn't it when LSU played Ohio State, if I remember right, that year? So I think that we could potentially see it, but not out of the Pac-12. A couple of reasons. Number one, USC has already lost to an USC lost to Utah, who lost to an SEC team. Oregon already lost to Georgia, who is an SEC team. Stay with me. If UCLA loses to Oregon, then there is no way that either team with one loss will get in, because Oregon will have already proved that the Pac-12 can't compete with the SEC, and they're going to look at that and go, well, they did beat UCLA, and if UCLA can't beat Oregon, who got drummed by an SEC team, and then they struggle with another team that beat an SEC team, then what? They have to beat Oregon in order to be able to make it to the CFP. It is a must-win situation. They're going to have to take the Pac-12, and they are going to have to be undefeated. Because I'm going to tell you something. A one-loss Alabama team, a one-loss Tennessee team, and an undefeated Georgia team is a problem. Even a one-loss Georgia team. If Bama and Georgia end up going, or Bama and Tennessee, whomever, makes it out of the SEC East, if you look at all three of those teams and they all have one loss, Georgia, Bama, and Tennessee, you don't think that there's no possibility that 3 one-loss SEC teams get in over a one-loss Pac-12 champion? It will happen, folks. It will happen. And we will all see those 3 teams again in a month after the season is over. It will happen. The pressure is all on UCLA, who, by the way, I've already talked about this. They're out of conference schedule. Bowling Green, Alabama State, South Alabama. No. They didn't really have a very decisive win over Washington. They had a double-digit win over Utah, but that game was a lot closer than that score suggests. And if they win this game, by the way, rest of the way, Stanford, Arizona State, Arizona, it's not until they play USC, which won't be until November the 19th. I mean, they could essentially coast right through. This is their game. And they are going to be on the road in Oregon. And I'm going to tell you something. That is not an easy task. Autzen Stadium, as a guy who's interviewed a lot of players, MMA fighters, etc., there are people that I know that live in Oregon that are like, dude, I live about a half a mile, maybe even a mile from that stadium, and I could drive a few miles further and still hear that place on game day. Whereas I have lived in other college towns, you wouldn't even know sports existed, even though the team was really good. What is going to be the deciding factor between Oregon and UCLA? Well, look, obviously, if you're UCLA, you want to bottle up Bo Nix, who's been playing very good ever since that debacle against Georgia, right? Only 3 interceptions on the year, guys, to 12 touchdowns. You got Franklin on the outside for Oregon. You're going to have to put a lot of pressure on Bo Nix. Now, that's not to say that DTR isn't playing great football, because he is. He's only got 2 picks and more TDs. Not to mention Z at running back, over 600 yards. They have a far better run game. Now, look, Chip Kelly's offense, I've always said, is a run-first offense. They just spread you out, and then they play, hurry-up football, like extreme mega hurry-up football. They just wear you down. In fact, I was one of the first ones to point out years ago when he was still with Oregon that it was really smash-mouth football in disguise. The issue is going to be, can Chip Kelly get a little bit of balance? And if he gets up big, maybe try and slow the game down a little bit. Look, I get it, man. If you get up 21-0 on Oregon or whatever the case may be, you're going to want to stay on them. But I don't see that happening. And UCLA has been getting by the skin of their teeth. They've got, I think, a good enough offense to win the game. Unfortunately, I don't think they have a good enough defense to win the game. And I think you're going to see Bo Nix be Bo Nix. I know that he struggled against teams like Georgia and some other teams. All right, I get it. But he came from the SEC. He knows what it takes to win at that level. And even though he got torched by Georgia, this is now later in the season where we are starting to see teams play their best version of their football. And I just think Oregon's playing better right now. UCLA's had a little bit more competition, so they should be primed. But I think Oregon wins that game. Close. I don't think they win it by double digits, probably by 3 or 6. And I think UCLA, it's going to come down to a final possession for them. But I just don't see them winning this football game. I haven't been overly impressed with UCLA on the season as it is, if I'm being extremely honest with you. I think DTR is a hell of a quarterback. I don't know if he's NFL level ready, but he is a hell of a quarterback. And he's going to have to really square up and put this game on his shoulders. I just want to see Chip Kelly do some different things. I think they need to implement some trick plays. I think they need to implement some motion plays. They need to slow it down a little bit. Oregon's going to play fast-paced too. So what I want is to see them try and slow it down a little bit and dictate a different way to the offense, or to the defense, pardon me. Because who's going to think Chip Kelly's willing to slow down? That's the thing. Who's going to think Chip Kelly is willing to slow down? Nobody. We've seen that dude literally up 60 points and just, Even with third string guys in there. All right, run it like this, run it like this, run it like just refusal to run the clock. And we've also seen it cost him some games as a result. If I'm him, I am slowing down the offense. That defense will be extremely confused, especially if you mix up the play calling the right way. What are we doing here? I know that the idea is to get in a formation that works, a group of players that work, run it down their throats so that way they can't have time to substitute. Because the only time they can substitute the defense is if the offense substitutes as well. So I get it, all right? We all understand it. But I just think it's cost him more than it's helped him sometimes. And as much as I like Chip Kelly, I just don't think they win this game. But we'll see. We'll be taking a look at Syracuse and Clemson as the week progresses. Not really going to get into that right now, especially since I talked about it on Sunday and Monday a little bit. But Texas is going to be playing Oklahoma State, that game in Stillwater. We'll be talking about that tomorrow as well. I think the other game that I want to take a look at right now, just real quick, K-State and TCU. You know, Martinez has got to have Nebraska fans just sick to their stomachs right now. And honestly, it really hasn't even been the passing. It's been the running. They're playing Coach Snyder's style of football with him. Let the quarterback pound you up the middle. Run the football right up the middle with your backs. Suck in that defense. Take some shots deep. Simple football. Let your defense do what they do. Fly all over the place. Make some plays. We couldn't talk about teams that are more night and day than TCU and Kansas State. Because TCU is going to want to come out and play huck-and-chuck football. And they're going to want to get Johnston going, the guy who's already got 500 yards receiving this season. Dugan's been so good about not turning the football over. Only one pick on the year. TCU, again, much like Oregon to me, is the team here with the most to lose. Again, not the greatest schedule out of the conference. Colorado, Tarleton, TCU. These are things that start to take shape as we get closer to the CFP. Now, I understand. They put a whooping on Oklahoma, but they beat KU, who's already lost, 2 games in a row now, thanks to TCU, and then, of course, OU bouncing back. They had a very difficult time stopping Oklahoma State's offense, who I think is a little bit more prolific than Kansas State's offense. What it's going to boil down to is TCU needs to step up their defense. I believed that they had the best defense in the Big 12. I still believe that, even though they gave up 34 to SMU. I think, though, from what we've seen with TCU, they do very good against these option style of quarterbacks. And so I like TCU to win this football game. And again, for them, if you look at them, much like a UCLA, they'll coast for a little while if they win this game, right? West Virginia is going to be next week. Then you're going to have Texas Tech, right? I mean, it's not going to be until you get down the road and you face Texas, and that's not until November the 12th. So if you win against Kansas State, you almost have the Big 12 going into the Big 12 championship game. And again, I don't think a one-loss Big 12 team gets over a potential one-loss Tennessee, one-loss Georgia, one-loss Alabama. Because if Alabama ends up taking the SEC West plus the SEC champion, Tennessee's already beat Alabama in a hell of a game. I just think that they would look at that and go, I don't mind putting 3 SEC teams in. I don't like it. You shouldn't like it, but it is what it is. So again, all the pressure on TCU to win that football game. Because now to me, Oklahoma State is out. KU is definitely out. Texas is absolutely out. So there's that. All right, everybody. Quick recap here. Like I said, Boston and Philly, pretty good game overall. Just Boston, so much more balance. Tatum playing out of his mind. Really good plays off the bench. Or pardon me, really good play off the bench. From Williams and Roden. Golden State, they just dominate the Lakers. And they're still the team in the NBA. It's pretty much all there is to that. UCLA, Oregon, I think that unless Chip Kelly does something extremely different in that game, I like Oregon to win at home. I just don't think that UCLA has and they have to win this game, period. They're going to have to go undefeated and be a Pac-12 champion. Because with one loss and that out-of-conference schedule against Southern Alabama and Alabama State, it just really doesn't cut the mustard. They're going to have to go undefeated, Pac-12 champion. TCU, Oregon, TCU and Kansas State. I like TCU to win that football game, but don't underestimate this Wildcat group either. They're good. They're good, but I just don't know if they have enough defense to stop TCU. I think TCU's offense is clearly better than what we've seen from OU, even though very similar styles of play. I really like TCU to be able to hang up a lot of points on Kansas State. And K-State's going to get their points probably. Even though I love TCU's defense, I think K-State will put up some points, but they just won't be able to go blow for blow in that regard. If I'm Kansas State, I want to make that a defensive game. I want to slow it down, and I just want to make it a defensive battle. I want to put a lot of pressure on their quarterback, and I'm going to mix up some blitz packages. I'm going to run a lot of zone man looks, some inside stunts. I'm going to do everything I'm blitzing probably 70% of the time. I want to wear down TCU's offensive line and make it to where they just don't have enough time to throw the football back there and really make this a defensive game, because I think TCU's defense is definitely good enough to shut down Kansas State. All right, everybody, I am Drew Duncan. This is the St. 57 Sports Show. Plenty to get to tomorrow, obviously. Perhaps later on today, depending on how things develop. In the meantime, in between time, I am wherever you are listening to podcasts, iHeart, Spreaker, Spotify, iTunes. I am wherever you are listening to podcasts. And as always, stay safe and take care of yourselves.